what I see a lot of being taught and what I teach myself is to keep the hands in, and then you reach toward the ball as it comes in. And sorry, I keep hitting my mic.
That's okay.
But getting a little, and I'm hitting my mic as I'm describing this, and only Jay can see it. So
you're looking good though. Your form looks amazing.
Awesome.
At the field, in your car, or on your couch, get your fast pitch info from the coach's mouth. Welcome to the From the Coach's Mouth podcast with your hosts, Jay Bolden and Ken Kraus.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the From the Coach's Mouth podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. Glad to have you along. I'm Ken Kraus, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Jay Bolden, and we're going to talk about a whole lot of different things today. It's just the two of us, so that's always fun. It's always quite the ride. Jay, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Ken. Sorry, I need more coffee after that. So I definitely think I need more coffee. I actually, I'm doing pretty good. I'm very excited for the holidays coming up. Give me a little break, detach a little bit. I always say it's a good time to take a break and not think about softball, not do softball. So I'm excited for that and spend a little bit more time with my family. How about you?
Yeah, well, to put it into perspective for people who are listening, by the time you're hearing this, we're in December, and we got the holidays coming up then. We're actually recording this the Saturday before Thanksgiving, so looking forward to that as well. So, we're definitely in the holiday season. I am taking a little bit of a break because we're going down to visit my daughter in Nashville, my daughter Kim, former softball player. And, she and her husband, Andrew, live down there, and we're going to go down there, have some nice Thanksgiving dinner and just kind of hang out with them. We haven't been down there in a while, so it'll be fun to do that visit. So no lessons while I'm out, but then I will be back. But at the same time, I always tell people, don't feel bad. If you want to take a little time off around now, it's not a bad time to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I actually encourage it. So I think there's nothing better than getting a break. I feel like the fall season keeps getting longer and longer and longer, and it's a lot of wear and tear on those arms. And then now it's kind of like, hey, it's time to put the work in. We have a little bit of a sample size from fall, so now let's take a look here and see some of the things that we can improve on, some goals that we can get after. But you definitely need to have a break there. I always say, like, even with some of the college kids, Ken, when they finish their season, in May, most of them in mid-May, most times I won't see them till like the first week of July. And I think that's an important message that they're the one making that choice. And that's because they need that time to shut those arms down, to just detach mentally and, again, be a person first. Softball player is, third on that list after being a student. So I think that's a huge thing. And especially at the younger ages, people think that because they're young, they can handle it. Like, no, that's not the case. They need time to just get away from softball, be a kid. Think about all the things that softball players miss, Ken, right?
Yeah.
There's homecomings they miss. There's birthday parties they miss. There's, family get-togethers that they miss. And we need to take that into perspective. These kids are sacrificing a lot of their childhood to be a softball player. And when the opportunity presents itself to let them just go be a kid, we need to let them do that and not keep forcing lessons and practices on them. So,
yeah, and I think that I'm going to coin a term here. It's FOFIB, fear of falling behind. And I think that, so many parents have that. They have this idea that if their kid skips a lesson or skips a practice, with a call, but, if they miss out on a week, they're going to fall behind, and then other people are going to get ahead of them. It's like, if your kid's falling that far behind after, missing one thing, you've got to really reevaluate everything you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have yet to have somebody who's taken a break that came back in and forgot how to hit or pitch.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Have you had anybody that's forgotten how to hit or pitch, Ken?
No, not at all. I think maybe
I didn't
sometimes
think so.
it looks like it for a little bit, but they get it back.
Sure, that's just knocking the rust off. But yeah, so things into perspective with that. Let them take a break, especially around the holidays. They've had a long season. Let them go be a kid. Let them go hang out with their friends. They're not going to forget how to hit or pitch. So
Yeah, for sure. And I that's important too. All of that socialization stuff. They have friends on their teams, and it depends. If you are playing on a local team, then your friends are your teammates, and your teammates are all of your friends. But there's also that thing if you're on a higher level travel team and kids are coming from all over. You've got the kids from school or from your neighborhood or whoever that you like to hang out with as well. It's nice to be able to do that. Go to an amusement park, go to just a regular park, I don't know, maybe kids still go to the mall. There's fewer and fewer malls than there used to be, but
yes, there are.
Going wherever it is kids go, a concert. There are lots of things that they can do and lots of experiences they can have that don't involve a bat and a ball and a glove. So I'm, all in favor of that. I like my kids to be well-rounded.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you want to get into today, Ken? What are we going to talk about here?
Well, Jay, I had an idea, and I thought, run this by you and see what you think. We're a couple of old guys, so maybe how the game has changed since, maybe the early 2000s. There's been a lot of change to it. The way the game is played, the tools that are used around it, the opportunities that are out there. So I thought that might be an interesting perspective, especially for the families that are kind of new to all of this and they just kind of take it for granted that the things that they do are, the things that have always gone on. It's kind of like, the digital kids that have no idea we didn't have cell phones, throughout our whole lives. That there was actually a time when you had to have a grounded phone. If you were out and you wanted to make a call, you had to find a phone booth or a payphone somewhere.
Yeah, payphone.
Yeah.
People don't even realize they have a payphone. What's a payphone?
Yeah. Yeah. Is that one? Right. Is that one of those burners you buy?
Yeah. All right. So let's start. Let's try to dig into this as fast, or not as fast, but as much as we can. Let's start on the pitching side.
Okay.
And then we'll go to the hitting side, and then we'll look at some defensive stuff. So what do you think since the early 2000s, 2000 on, what have been some of the changes or biggest changes that we've seen in pitching?
Well, I think I actually want to start general. This affects all of those areas, and that's just the proliferation of places where you can go to practice or to get lessons. When my oldest daughter Stephanie was starting, it was hard to find a place to go inside. When she and I would go to pitch, a lot of times we would just sneak into the high school and go into one of the rooms that they had and just act like we belonged there and try to do that, or we'd have to run out to a field in the summer. There were no real indoor facilities around. And even when I started doing lessons, I was traveling for a way. I was going to a place called Grand Slam USA, which was more of an amusement place really than a training facility.
Where was that place at, Ken?
That was up in Spring Grove, Illinois.
Oh, okay.
So, they had a little basketball court there with a plastic floor. It was not a full-size court. It was like a couple of half courts side by side. And I would teach my lessons on one of those. And a lot of times there'd be a basketball game going on right next to us.
Yeah.
And then as far as batting cages went, it was the commercial batting cages with, pitching machines. And then you could also, you could have a party there. They had a little shop where you could buy bats and gloves and things like that. So it was not what you would think of as a training facility today. Now you look around today and you can hardly swing a dead cat without hitting a training facility.
Yeah, I mean, it's a true statement. That's definitely it too. I think another thing, and maybe that goes hand in hand with that, is I think, as a lot of the rec ball leagues they're struggling, like it's hard. There's one or two teams. I remember back in the day, and the rec ball was it was popular. They'd have 10, 15, 20 teams. You'd have a big old tournament at the end of the year, right? It's not like that anymore. Some of them are struggling. They've got to combine with other neighborhoods and towns just to have to put a rec ball team together. And I think, that's changed a lot too. And we have all these facilities now, but it's more geared towards the travel.
Yeah, and so certainly travel ball has gotten a lot bigger than it used to be. Our local high school was a big powerhouse in high school ball for a long time. And that was because there was a travel team in town. And, it was seen as a feeder type of team. But most of the high schools around us didn't have anything like that. So their kids were all coming out of rec ball, whereas these kids were at least playing a little bit higher level of ball. But I also remember that, with the rec ball, you used to be able to have, like 8 teams at each level. So all the teams would play each other. And I think these days you're right. It's most of these teams, there's one rec ball team in each town, maybe 2. And so different organizations have to get together and schedule. So it's kind of travel ball light or travel ball-ish because you're going to different towns to play kids you don't know.
Yeah, another thing too, I'll tell you, since when I started too, is multi-sport athletes have kind of really gone away.
Yeah.
I mean, now what I mean by that, I'm not saying like, you have a kid that'll play 2 sports. I see a decent amount of those, but I remember when I first started, Ken, I would have a kid that would do cross country in the fall, basketball in the winter, and then would play softball in the spring. And rarely do I see any of that anymore. It's they might play one sport in the fall and then they play their other sport, either in the winter or spring, not 3 sport athletes anymore. And I remember, when I first started teaching and coaching, it was, I was the JV coach for the first 2 years there in like 98, 99. And I had to make cuts on the JV team. I mean, we had 24 kids trying out for a JV team. And our varsity team had to make cuts as well too. And now, it's just most high schools are just down to either just a varsity team or just like a varsity and one JV team. And then, they struggle in getting numbers for that. So that's just been a big change I've seen over the years too. And I think it's become more specialized. I think all sports have become more specialized, not just softball. So and I think the demand on these student athletes has become greater and greater for their specific sport. And is that healthy or isn't it? I don't know. I think there is a part that, both of us, like we specialize in certain things and hitting and pitching, but at the same time too, like athletes are what I need first. We can make you into a good softball player, but I need an athlete first. I need you to learn how to let your body move. So those are things, at least from my perspective, that have changed wholly since I started.
Yeah. And along with that, it used to be, again, when I first started the organization I was a part of, the old Mundelein Thunder, one of our big advantages was that we were offering off-season training. And what that consisted of was we had a deal with the park district where we could use their gym. And on Saturday mornings, we would have open clinics. And the only caveat on it was that we couldn't restrict it just to our players. So, it was through the park district. Anybody could sign up. Even people from out of district could sign up. So we drew a lot of kids that were on other teams. So we were training our competition for a large part of it. And we had a lot of rec ball kids whose parents wanted them to get some work in and all. And it was a huge advantage. As time went on, more teams started having their own practices, and then they were specific to their teams. And what had been an advantage and a fundraiser, to be honest with you, but what had been an advantage for us became a disadvantage because we were still doing these more general clinics with kids of all kinds of different abilities, while other teams were training their players specifically. So, it's very different how it's approached. And, like I said, we were once a week. Now I hear about these teams in the winter practicing 2 or 3 times a week. And I got to honestly say, I don't know why. That's going to cut into the ability to have multi-sport athletes who learn how to move and learn how to use different muscles. Because if your travel team is practicing 2 or 3 times a week and you have to be there for those practices in order to get playing time or in order to kind of keep up with the rest of the team, it's going to be tough for you to be in other sports.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and that is tough. And I think we've seen that change quite a bit too. Just with scheduling, like you said, we have all these facilities now. It's just,
Yeah.
And I think, we need to allow the kids to be athletes and not punish them. Like we've talked about that before here on the podcast. Like the punishment part of that just really bothers me. Like it's the kids trying to be the best athlete they can be. They're, like I said, they're not going to forget. And a lot of them, when they do miss the practice, they're going to go to the facility with their dad and hit or come for a pitching lesson or do those things. So it's not like the kids aren't putting in the work. So again, I think that's just, a philosophy thing per organization. And I think, allowing these kids to be athletes is probably the number one thing that we need to let them do.
Yeah. And it's funny because I have a good example of that with it being an athlete. I have a new girl that started with me, and she's never played any sports before, as far as I know, and trying to work with her on hitting things that you just take for granted. The starting point is way further back than it typically is. I mean, this girl just doesn't know how to move her body in space.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, that's where we started. I mean, she's a sweet kid. I love her to death. But whereas if you tell a kid to take a swing, they might have an ugly swing, but they know how to swing the bat. This girl has no idea even how to do that. So I had to really, really, really go back to basics. And I told her I'm taking videos now because in 6 months, if you work at it, you're not going to recognize yourself. This is going to be, you're going to look back and go, oh my gosh, how did I ever do that?
Yep, I agree. All right, let's break into the pitching side if you're okay with that.
Yep.
All right, so what do you think, Ken? Since early 2000s, what changes have been drastic for the pitching side?
Well, I think probably the most drastic thing has been the advance of technology. And again, we can talk about that in terms of hitting and fielding and all the other things, but I think more than anything, it's pitching. I mentioned cell phones before. The use of video. Okay, so that's a big one for me, is how video is being used. And it seems simple because everybody thinks, okay, yeah, you whip out your phone, you shoot a video, and then you take a look at it and see what's going on. That didn't exist when I started doing lessons. Yeah. If I was going to video kids, I had to bring my laptop and I had to bring this big old camcorder, and I had to probably either put it on a tripod or have a table handy and run power to it. And, it was a big production for it. And then after we shot the video, have to, run it back on the computer. So you had to have cables to do that, just so that you could see one little movement or, one pitch. And so, I might capture 4 or 5 pitches as we go along for each pitcher. I mean, heck, I can do that in 10 minutes now.
Yeah, definitely. And again, the slow motion aspect of that too is even more incredible, right? Like, being able, the frame rates now to be able to see, and again, technology wise, you have instruments now that'll tell you what finger the ball's coming off last, which way it's spinning, I mean, not that, I still don't use it, but the electrical tape on the ball is still one of my favorite things to use. It's just for, visually for me to see instead of using the camera from time to time, but I still rely on that camera. So technology is definitely, I agree with you. It has helped pitching so much. Although, Ken, I will say, as much technology as we have and as much slow motion video as we have, we're still seeing people teach hello elbow.
Yeah.
It's unreal. Even though I'll have several people say, oh yeah, she does hello elbow. And I go, okay, well, let's slow it down and take a look. Well, you see that right there? She's kind of internally rotating, and then how she finishes really doesn't make a difference because that's just what you're thinking. So, however, there are still people out there who are teaching that, but don't understand that the term internal rotation is biomechanical. So anyway, but one I want to talk about, Ken, is I think things on the pitching side that have made the biggest difference is, one, people do not remember that the mound used to be at 40 feet.
Right.
Now, with that being said, the mound was at 40 feet, but you had to have both feet touching, right? So we didn't have that where you could start with your foot off the rubber there. You had to have it. They both had to be touching, which made for people really hard to use their legs. They really had to, load and go. It was crazy. I think those two things right there are big time help to pitching. I still think batters still have the advantage with some of that stuff. I'm sure we'll get into, but hitters still have the advantage. But the feet not having to touch, and then again the mound being at 40 feet, now moving back to 43 feet all over, I think has been two big things. So how about you?
Yeah, well, I would have put the mound or the pitching rubber moving back to 43 feet. I would have put that as a hitter advantage. It was harder for the pitchers. Yeah, it definitely made a difference. And what's really amazing about it is that when you think about it, back in the day when the official distance was 40 feet for college and for high school, 35 feet was still being used in 12U.
Yeah.
But the training, I think, the proliferation of training that you have now has made it pretty easy. It would have been ridiculous for a lot of these kids to be thrown from 35 feet at that age now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree, Jay, the change to how you can use your feet. And then even, we look at the leaping rules, how that changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although there are those out there who are trying to abuse it. And, who you are.
The ninjas.
Yes.
The ninjas. Get them up there, that flying high kick.
Yeah. But, all of those things, the changes to the pitching rules have, enabled the kids to be more athletic when they're moving. In some cases have taken a lot of the ticky-tacky out of pitching as well. So coaches can't just complain. They didn't do a good job of training their hitters. And so now they're going to just try to use the rules to get a good pitcher out of there and get someone in that's just kind of stepping and tossing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think too, and you'll remember this back in the day, Ken. I remember when lineups were like slap hitter heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think everybody would slap it except for like two kids, right? Like,
yeah.
And that's back when the mound was 40 feet, right? So and they had to have both feet on the rubber. I remember okay, so one through three are all slappers, 4 hits right, 6, 7, 8, 9 are all slappers too. It's like, wow. Right now, you'll see a couple here or there, but it's just, and I think that's because, again, that mound being at 40 feet and the short distance, and it was just different. It was, I don't know, it was a different time.
Yeah. Yeah, it really was. The game was very, very different with it. And certainly, those were the days when Arizona and UCLA dominated. And, they had a lot of those in their lineups.
Yes.
And I remember hearing a story about one of the, it's still a premier program now. And they said that, when they did tryouts, they didn't even bother with all the hitting and all of the other skills. They would just line the kids up and have them sprint. They said, we can teach them everything else. Can't teach them to be super fast.
Yeah.
So, they would just be like, we just got to get these kids, put the ball in play and beat it out.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I agree. I will say too, and I'm sure we're going to get into the hitting aspect here pretty soon, but the bats, we got to talk about the bats and the ball. I mean, those two things have changed drastically over the years.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that. Anything else that you can think of on the pitching side that has, kind of changed or, not advantage, but just different than when back in the day?
Well, I think, again, I'm going to go back to technology and things like 4D motion or where you have, the video captures if you can afford to go and get that done. But they can really get under the hood and take a look at what's happening. Some of the EMG stuff, you can see what muscles are firing and are they firing in the right order. The amazing things that you're able to do, and a lot of it at more of a consumer level. So like I have 4D motion technology. It's not cheap, but it's not crazy expensive either. Mm-hmm. So if I want to, hook a bunch of sensors to the kid and have her throw some pitches and then go ahead and take a look at it, it gives you even more answers than just the visual. So I think that, that's been an important thing. And then you kind of mentioned it, the ball spin and all that. Like, now you have the Pitch Logic ball that came out. And as you guys are listening to this, I did do a product review of the Pitch Logic on my Life in the Fast Pitch Lane blog. Pretty in depth. So, grab yourself a cocktail and have a seat because it's going to take you a while to get through it. But it's, the ability to say, okay, here, this is how fast the ball is spinning. This is the exact direction it's spinning. These are some of the other things about it, like you said before, which, the last touch on the ball and how it's coming off the fingers. So much detail available that can be used to say, okay, you know what? this is working pretty well, but let's see if we can make it work even better.
Yep. All right, let's switch over to the hitting side, Ken. And you do a lot more hitting than I do, so I'm gonna rely on you. So I'm gonna talk about the. There's a couple that I want to just flashing back to the to the 90s. Okay. Man, I missed the 90s. I think the intro to this one should be Pearl Jam's Jeremy, just to bring us back. Ken, I think would be a great song intro for this one. But anyway, the point of that is, I remember back in the day, the way that they used to teach hitting, and the bats, number one, everything used to ding, right? We used to hear that all the one-piece bats, aluminum. I mean, full, whether it's TPSs or TPX, I can't even remember. Was it TPS? Ken, remember?
Yeah, and the Louisville Burgundy bat was the height of technology. I mean, if you had one of those, man, it's like the way people look at a Ghost today. Only that was an $80 bat.
I got to find one of those because I want to use it as a fungo. I have to find one. Yeah. So if anybody has a 90s Louisville TPS in their closet, please message me. I will buy that off of you. I would love to use that as a fungo. So that's one, the bat. The second thing is, I remember before I was the varsity coach in my high school, I was a JV coach. And I remember the varsity coaches teaching kids not to step.
Oh, really?
That was
the no stride swing, the real wide no stride. Yeah.
Yes. Get the feet wide and just turn and hit the ball because that's a softball swing.
Yeah.
So that's one I remember. I'll never forget that day. And I was like, what? Like, it just didn't make even sense to me. Right. So anyway, there's that.
And I got news for Jay. There are still people who are teaching that. I still run into it.
well aware. And I'm not, I'm just saying, back in the day, there was the softball swing is different than the baseball swing and that whole thing. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Right. Like, there are, there's differences there, but the swing is still the same. Right. So it doesn't matter what ball you're hitting. The swing is still the same. Okay. You could throw a beach ball, still be the same. Right. Doesn't matter. So, and then the ball again, I remember the core being, was it not so, do you remember what the core started with, Ken?
Oh, I think the core was actually tighter. It was more lively. The ball was more lively.
I thought so.
Like a 400 core versus a 375 or something, or maybe even 425. I think it was
425 or yes. I actually have in our high school, I found a white one. That had the IHSA logo on it, and the core was, I think, 425, like you're talking about. So I'll have to bring it and show it to you next time I see you. But so those are the 3 big ones that I kind of remember as hitting has changed. So I'm gonna pass this over to you now, and you can break it down a little bit more for us.
Okay, and I agree with you on the technology on the bats. I mean, what kids are swinging today versus what they were swinging back in the day. And of course, it probably didn't matter that much that the technology wasn't that great because, one of the biggest things that I've seen that's a difference is the work the hitters are putting in the off season now. I mean, as far as I know, pitchers always would go and do lessons. Pitchers would work hard. They'd be doing it every week. Hitters, if you weren't a pitcher, you didn't even pick up a bat until spring. And, with rare exceptions, I mean, I know that there were kids that were doing lessons, but not very much. And it showed. So all the advantages were on the pitching side. Now, kids are out there, they're hitting, they're doing lessons, they're going to cages on their own, they're doing machines, they're doing front toss, they're doing soft toss, they're swinging the bat a whole lot more. They're doing tee work. And it's made a huge difference in what happens. It's made it much more difficult for the pitchers to get people out. So I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Yeah, I mean, definitely in the way hitting is taught. I think that, like you were saying, there used to be the softball swing, which was essentially designed to put the ball in play because pitchers were so dominant. If you could get a ground ball going, with decent speed on it, the fielding just wasn't very good, and you could get on base, whether it got through or whether the kid made an error or threw the ball away. Now the fielding's gotten much better. You can't get away with the just put it in play mentality anymore. You have to be able to bang that ball. And, even if you're hitting a ground ball, but the game is not on the ground anymore. You don't have as many slappers as you used to, and most of us are trying to get our kids to hit line drives or even towering fly balls. It's funny. I had a girl that was, college player, and she used to get dinged in their practice sessions. They'd be in the cage, and if the ball hit the ceiling or hit the top of the cage, which was a pretty high cage, even if it was in the back of the cage, they would tell her, no, you got to hit the back. You can't hit the top. I'm like, man, you look at that trajectory of that ball, that ball's going out. You shouldn't be hitting the back of the cage. You should be trying to hit that top of the cage, because it only needs to travel on its trajectory. It only needs to travel about 110 feet. And if it does that, if it goes out or up 110, it's going to come down in 110. Now you're at 220. And in most places, that's a home run.
Yeah, that's a bomb.
Yeah, she was lucky. Finally, they brought in a new assistant coach who actually understood hitting. And they just told her, he told the other coaches, just leave her alone. She's fine. And she wound up leading her team in home runs her senior year.
Nice.
But yeah, I think that, just the thought of what you were trying to do, they back in the 2000s or in the 90s, when did you ever hear the term launch angle?
No, never.
Never.
No.
And now, now they measure.
Or exit velocity. Never heard exit velocity.
Yeah.
Right. Never heard of those two terms, and again, I think both of those are, again, analytics that help hitters, right? Like, I think understanding where, like you talked about, line drives and again, how hard you're hitting the ball are two important things, right? And again, making sure you hit the ball too. I think, even now, I was talking about, like, with just the other day with somebody, the vision training that these kids are doing. It's not just hitting, like being able to understand how important your vision is. Like, Ken, you could swing as hard as you want and you can hit the ball as far as you want, but if hit it as hard as you can, but if you can't see it, it don't matter anyway, right? So I'm seeing these kids doing these vision training drills, and I think that's just, again, I think just the expertise in some of these things and the focus on some of these things that are training kids visually, I think, is incredible too. And nobody ever, back in the day, we didn't have any of that stuff. Here's the ball, hit it, right? Like, that's all it was.
Yeah.
So,
I actually did some vision training early. I, looked up some of those things. I used to do a thing. I haven't made them up in a while, but it was like a long piece of string that had red, yellow, and green beads on it. And you would, attach one end of the string to a door, and you would put the other one right up on your nose, and then spread the beads out across there, and just shift your eyes, red, yellow, green, back and forth, all the way coming into like 2 feet in front of you, just to try to teach yourself how to track it. And then Visual Edge came out, and that's a computer-based training thing that was originally designed to help kids with dyslexia. And I've had a few kids do that, although I don't think they've been as dedicated to it as they should be. But, that's another great way to train your eyes to pick things up and to recognize things faster and track them.
Yeah. And like I said, you never heard about that back in the day.
No.
Those things were not happening. So how about, let's go to the defensive side a little bit here, Ken. What about defensively? What do you think has changed there over the years?
Well, I can think of one thing specifically. It used to be like for fielding a ground ball. Okay, the technique that was taught was to reach your hands out, ahead of time, and then when the ball came in, kind of give with it and bring it into you. And now, what I see a lot of being taught and what I teach myself is to keep the hands in, and then you reach toward the ball as it comes in. And sorry, I keep hitting my mic.
That's okay.
But getting a little, and I'm hitting my mic as I'm describing this, and only Jay can see it. So
you're looking good though. Your form looks amazing.
Awesome. But just the idea of reaching out toward the ball to scoop it that way. I think a little more focus on catching that ball on a short hop, make sure that it's not going to go off anywhere. I think, the other thing, and, motor preferences has brought some of that into play as well, is that everybody doesn't have to do it the same way. That, depending on what your motor profile is, you're maybe going to stand a little bit taller. You might get the ball a little closer to your feet than someone else who is going to squat down more and get the ball more out in front. So doing those things, I think maybe teams were doing that, but I never saw it as doing dailies where you're just, those short hops and just working on get that ball in the glove. How about you, Jay? What have you seen?
Yeah, well, you know what? Something popped into my mind there, and I think we should ask David this the next time we get a chance to talk to him. I wonder what his take on the Auburn hop would be.
Yeah.
Right? Because that one is so that they're kind of on the balls of their feet, right? Which is, that's great for aerials, but terrestrials not so much. So I'd love to get his take on that. I don't know if I'll see him. You might see him before me or whatever, but I'd love to just get his take on it and see because didn't they take the Auburn hop from tennis players? Right? Isn't that where that came from, Ken? Do you remember?
I don't remember where it came from. I just remember it was a big thing. Thanks to TV, it was a big thing there for a little while. I don't know that it still is.
Yeah, I remember that happening. I was just like, and again, after having the motor preference stuff be there or going through that, I'm like, well, that helps some, doesn't help everybody. And again, I guess it's maybe just getting them momentum or reaction time to it. I'm not sure, but.
Yeah, and we have a guest coming up too that we can ask about it. Somebody,
that's I didn't think about that. That's great. Yes, we'll have to. We got to put that on the list to make sure we ask that question.
Yeah, for sure.
What I will say, Ken, is I think that some of the things that I have seen is that they're just faster. Like it's just the kids, the players are just faster. Is that the training? Is that is that just being a better athlete? I will say throwing has changed. I will say this a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Anybody who has taken the time to break down throwing and has not looked up Wasserman, right? Like some of the stuff and drills that he's teaching, like the scarecrow drill, right? Like some of those things where you're understanding that you don't have to point that ball out towards the outfield. And, and so I think that has changed.
Yeah. No goalposts.
Yeah. Right. Like, I think that's, those are important things that have kind of really helped. And he's worked with plenty of organizations and teams and kids and so on and so forth. And I think that he's, kind of broken some things down. So that's helped. I think that's the throwing mechanics has changed a little bit with some of these kids.
Oh yeah. I think just the fact that somebody's working on throwing, I think that a lot of times kids were just kind of left to throw on their own. If you could get the ball from wherever you were standing to wherever you were trying to get it, everybody was happy. Nobody worked on it, or at least not that many. I did, but even not to the level that, you have now. I had adopted a lot of the Wasserman stuff to teach throwing because it's just better than what we were learning at the time.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that's helped change the game a lot too. I think also, and here's my point, Ken. I think, and now this is just from my prior experiences. I remember back in the day, in those late 90s, early 2000s, you never saw a lot of double plays.
Yes. Yeah.
Never saw a lot. So here, let me get to my point. Like now you see a lot. Right. So the throwing's better, the feet, the footwork. I will say this. I think the footwork at second base coming from shortstop and second base has gotten tremendously better. I remember I was doing this in organizational practice one time and a coach and I are talking about this and he's having all of his players come across. He's having the second baseman come across second base to the shortstop and then making the throw to one. And I was like, well, it's speed and direction of the ball, right? So like if that ball's hit more towards the 5-6 hole, towards the third base side, sure, I want my second baseman coming to get that force out at all costs, right? However, if that ball's hit more up the middle, I want my second baseman to be on the other side of second base, right? So she can pop back and throw. And we just didn't get into it. We just had a discussion about it. And he's like, oh, and then the next week he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that's kind of what they're teaching now. The kids are moving faster. So the following week he's like, you know what? He's like, you're right. He's like, I talked to my buddy who's a college coach and they're teaching. I said, yeah, you're starting to see double plays being turned at the collegiate level, and that's, that was back in the day. I remember, am I right on that, Ken, or wrong? I didn't see a lot of double plays turned, like a 4-6-3 or, a 6-4-3 double play.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. In fact, I remember going to some of the coaching clinic and the college coach saying, coaches, don't waste your time on double plays. So, everybody wants to do these double plays. You're going to practice it. But how many have you ever really seen work out? So the kids just can't do that. And I watch now and I see these games, and not only is it a double play, but it's clearly a double play.
Oh, yeah.
And, you're talking about athletes that can get up the line in 3 seconds or less, and they're being doubled off at first base. It's the level of play, the speed of play, the ability to transition the ball, the ability to know where you are in space to make those plays. It has all improved so much. And, that was kind of what I was talking about before with the old, hit a ground ball, and keep that ball on the ground, keep that ball on the ground. It's just not as good a strategy as it used to be. We'll take it if it gets through, but it's not what I'm going to be working toward. So when you think about that, then, so let's talk about, an offensive strategy thing. How much in softball do you really see the hit and run anymore?
I see it occasionally, not a ton. I mean, we will do it at St. Xavier from time to time, just again depending on where we're at and what's going on. We've got kids at St. Xavier. We got a kid stole almost 70 bases last year, so we don't really need to hit and run with her. We just need to let her do her thing and then just hit her in with a line drive.
Right.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I think very rare compared to what it used to be. I will definitely agree with you on that one. I think that's been something where it's kind of gone away.
Yeah. And, I think that the whole philosophy in games has changed as well. You look at statistically what happens, and, as they've done more and more large number statistics, they've looked at it like the sacrifice bunt used to be an automatic. Every team get a run around first base with nobody out, bunt her over to second base, and then, have 2 outs to bring her in. Well, they ran the stats on that, and they looked at it, and they said you actually lose 3 percentage points of likelihood of getting that runner in from second base with 1 out versus first base with no outs. I think there's just been a better understanding of what creates runs, and that is, you got to preserve those outs. Outs are the currency of the game.
Yeah.
Outs are gold. If you're on offense, you want to be really stingy about giving up those outs rather than just, willy-nilly saying, well, I'm going to give one up to advance a runner to second. Maybe with nobody out, you want to advance a runner to third with a sacrifice bunt, or runners on first and second and get them to second and third and try to get that, get them in from there. But, just this whole idea that we're going to play for 1 run, I think that's just gone away.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on that one too. I think that situationally, and what's happening in the game will dictate some of those things, right? To put the bunt down or not. But, more times than not, base hit doesn't necessarily mean the next person's going to bunt, which, again, we're going to let our hitters hit. We want to let them eat. That's what we say. They want to eat. We're going to let them eat. So I want to go back real quick though, Ken. I think one thing, and this is something that I've kind of changed over time too, as we're seeing better athletes, and I'm not saying at young ages, I'm saying a little bit more in the older ages, I see more and more instruction with them using 1 hand instead of 2. I'm talking about fielding, right?
Yes,
a pop-up or catching the ball. It used to be, hey, get your hands together out here. Now we've seen the range of motion with the hand. So I talk to my daughter all the time about this, like, hey, we're gonna learn how to catch with 1 hand, right? Because and so one thing I'll do, even ground balls, Ken, like we have to understand sometimes 2 hands on a ground ball outside of the body's frame is not going to work well for your child,
right?
For your player. So I'll do this with my own kid. Like we'll go to the facility and I'll hit her some ground balls inside there, and I'll take a ball and I'll put it in her throwing hand already, and then I'll hit her ground ball, right? And I'll let her work that range of motion outside of her body, like on a forehand to outside the body or a backhand that's past it. If we try to work 2 hands on some of those things, those kids never get the range of motion they need if the second hand is there on some of those things. That's like, Ken, That's like a first baseman catching the ball at first base with two hands.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you're losing range of motion with those things, and we can't do that. So, and so for me, I think it doesn't mean that she's going to be great every time I hit her a ball with a ball in her throwing hand, but it does give her the confidence to use one hand outside the body's frame to get it. And I tell her all the time, if it's between in your frame, you're going to double up. You're going to get that hand close to that mitt, and you're going to use two hands, and you're going to transfer as fast as you can, get rid of the ball. And so that's something I've seen a lot. I see a lot more play with one hand instead of two. How about you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, if you think about it, for anybody that doesn't believe in that, here's an experiment for you to try, is go along a wall or a fence or something where you can kind of mark a distance and, have somebody stretch to one side or the other using two hands. Then take that throwing hand and put it back behind them. So separate it and you reach that one out, and then see how much farther you can reach with the glove, because you don't have the throwing hand restricting that range. It just, it makes no sense. People were always so adamant about the two-handed thing. Honestly, when I work with catchers, I tell them 99% of the time catcher is a one-handed position. In fact, if I'm working on blocking with a catcher and I see her trying to catch with two hands, I take a Sharpie and I put a mark on the back of her hand. I just put a line on the back of her throwing hand. I say, okay, that's a broken bone, and every time they do it, they get another one. And, it's kind of a fun thing. They laugh, they get it, but it does make the improvement, because there's so much that can happen to a catcher. When ball hits the ground, it gets deflected on a foul tip. There's other things that can go on with it. And having that hand exposed at all is just a huge risk. You can break a finger, you can break a thumb, you can break the back of the hand. Those bones in the hand are kind of brittle. So, catchers for sure. And I agree with you too. With first base, 99% of the time, unless that ball is like right in that cage of between your shoulders and your hips, side to side too. If it's not in your body frame, one-handed.
Yep.
Now, I'm not as big a fan of, kind of the one hand, it, almost looks lazy on an outfield fly. If you're there, if you're right underneath it and you're parked under it, I see that a lot in Major League Baseball, where, I think part of the reason is they got a tiny ball they're using and they have a giant glove.
Yeah.
But, if you're catching a fly ball, I'd still rather have that second hand at least close by in case it bounces off. And you can grab it with the other hand and maybe suck it into your body, if nothing else. But yeah, I agree. I think that more use of one hand is becoming more common, and for good reason.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about a lot of these things here, Ken. Anything else that you want to talk about in the changes?
All right. Well, I think that one other one that, I think has come along is what happens with runners on base, and do you steal as much as you used to? There are certain players, yes. If you've got blinding speed, when we were talking to Joe Kinsella, I mentioned Kaya Mismash. That kid, her freshman year set a stolen base record for her school, and then she broke it the following year. Just unbelievably quick. And so if you can do that and get away with it, that's great. But I think that, as hitting has improved, there's been less need to have runners stealing bases. You can afford to wait at least for a while. And so, I think that's gotten a little bit better. I think umpires are watching the leaving early thing a little more too.
Yeah, definitely that too. Yeah.
So that's, kind of killed that part of it somewhat. But yeah, a lot of that's that Moneyball philosophy, is don't steal, don't take that chance. Let's just hit them over.
Yep. Awesome. Good stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if there was anything else just from a game philosophy or, it's such a different game. It's such a faster game. It's an exciting game.
I love it.
You know what? So this doesn't really affect most kids, but at the collegiate level, you should know this, the pitch clock.
Yes. Well, let me speak on that really quickly. So last year, the pitch clock thing was a big thing, right? Like they were calling it all the time in the fall. It's driving me nuts. there was no clarification on things. Like I asked the guy when I was there, I'm like, so, we had a kid takes her time. Most of them are within the 20 seconds, but they moved it to 20 seconds. At one point, I believe it was 15 seconds, Ken.
Okay.
And that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's just like, do they need to take that long? No. But is it really slowing the game down if we have a kid that goes a little bit longer to throw a pitch? I mean, honestly, right? The part of that, what drove me crazy is the inconsistencies of it, right? Okay. Now let's say, officially, and they've clarified this now. Like when does the clock start?
Yeah.
Now we have clarification. Before it was, hey, as soon as she gets the ball. Now it's as soon as she gets the ball and goes to the back of the circle. Like those things have changed and those things they've been clarified. What happens if it's inclement weather?
Yeah.
Right. You got to wipe the ball off. It's slippery, or you got to ask for a new one. Is the clock still going? So now what you see is a lot less of that pitch clock being called. And let's be honest here, Ken, right? I get it. So we're going to speed the game up by having a pitch clock, right? However, I can tell you this from experience. Every inning when you're on ESPN, you are waiting for them to come back from a commercial break to start.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to speed the game up, but we're not speeding the game up at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like we'd wait for 15 seconds, 20, maybe 30 seconds sometimes to wait to come back from a commercial break before the umpire would give the point for them to be able to start. But yet we're going to speed the game up with a speed, make the pitcher throw and the batter get in there earlier. I don't get it. I don't make that make sense. Now I get it, right? One's revenue and one isn't. So, I think that's a part of it. Like this year has been so much better than last year. There's clarification. There's a little added time to it. The clock starts correctly. You get a trigger finger happy person there, those things. And again, it's very, at least at our level, it's not enforced tremendously because honestly, they're barely breaking it if they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So when you said inclement weather, that sparked something else that we totally missed that I think is having a huge impact on the game. And that's turf fields.
Oh, yes. Love turf fields.
Yeah. Well, that's great for getting the game in. However, all right. So let's say you have a turf infield and you have a grass outfield. What shoes do you wear?
Why do you have a grass outfield? Get a turf field all the way. Who wanted to save a few extra bucks just to do the whole thing?
Yeah.
It's crazy. No, I agree with you. Well, what we do, because we do play some teams that have turf and grass, is we wear molded.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, that's where it's gone to. I've had some kids that, molded cleats are coming back just because of that. But you get, some places where they have a multi-use field. It could be a baseball or a softball field. So they throw one of the pitching mats down there. And now that pitching mat's sliding a little bit because maybe, there's a little slick underneath. And, kids are getting off balance. They're having a harder time pitching. I'll be following on Game Changer and I'll see some kid who's normally reliable, this pitcher who's normally really sharp, and she gave up 4 or 5 walks in a game. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? And then, we get into a lesson the next week and they say, they had the turf mat and it was sliding and I couldn't get my footing.
Yeah.
And, it was, they had a turf mat down on a grass field. And that's the worst of it because they can't wear their regular cleats. They got to wear the molded cleats or the turf shoes there. But then what are you going to do? You're going to change your shoes when you go out, go up to hit. So,
no.
I think, it's kind of go all turf or don't go turf at all.
Okay. So I got to stop you. Here's one for you. We played a Division II team this fall out here by me. All turf, infield, outfield, except for the pitcher's mound is dirt. And the bullpen is half turf, half dirt.
Oh my gosh.
Explain that to me.
Yeah, that makes no sense at all. I mean, that poor pitcher, unless you're going to change your shoes, to go out and pitch. But then what happens? What happens if you have to field the ball?
It's a beautiful field. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
It had to be like a baseball thing. I don't know. Back in the day, baseball thing. I don't know. That is, it's definitely seen very few of those. I think there's only maybe 3 or 4 in the country that do it like that. It's strange. And then you get all the dirt when the pitcher pitches that gets onto the turf too. Like that can't be healthy for that thing. I don't know. It's definitely every year it's an interesting, like, man, why didn't you just do the whole thing? It's right there.
Yeah.
It's right there. Finish it, So I don't know. Strange.
Yeah, very strange. And of course the turf fields too. I think that they do, for ground balls, they do play faster. So, hit that through there. And the, you don't have as much of a risk of the rocks or the, other things on a field that might divert the ball, but it still makes it, I think, a little bit harder to field. Just, the way the ball can bounce off of there.
Yeah, for sure.
So that, that's, I think, had an impact and is probably going to have even more of an impact as we go along, as more and more fields go turf.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the last thing on my mind, the armbands. And then, I guess extending beyond that, now they're getting, where you can do it on the smartwatch.
Yeah.
People, in fact, somebody was just telling me that they have a friend who's inventing something where, can use with any kind of a smartwatch and signal things into the pitcher or whoever on there. But, back in the day, as a coach, third base coach trying to give signs, you had to have the indicator. You had to be throwing all these nonsense signs and doing all these other things so the other team didn't pick it up and pick your signs. Now, you just hear, okay, so 3-1-4. And, and then everybody looks at their arm. Yep. Look at their forearm. And I get it. Again, in college where it's a money type of sport, not really a big revenue, but I get why they would do that and how competitive it is. When I see a 10U team or a 12U team using those, I find it kind of funny. It's like, Joe Blow over there on the other side, I don't think he's trying to pick your signs. He's trying to make sure that his kids aren't picking daisies out in the outfield.
Yeah, true statement.
But, you see it on TV and people think, oh, that's cool. But, I don't know. I just wonder about that. Are we dumbing down the game a little too much by using some of that stuff?
100%. We are. We'll get into that too at some point along there. And we've talked about that with several guests before. It's very robotic at times, but that's a topic for another day. We'll have to get a good guest on for that one. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, anything else? That was good today, Ken. I thought we talked about a lot of good things. The game has definitely changed. I definitely feel for the better too. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to see these kids just do, congrats to all those kids who are getting committed and going through that recruiting process thing. And all that hard work's paying off for you guys. So congrats to all of you if you've signed recently or are, all that good stuff coming up.
Yeah. Although you just brought up one more thing. I know you're trying to get out, but I'm going to keep you here a little bit longer.
No, it's fine. I'm here all day. I don't have to go anywhere. Let's go.
But just, when you mentioned recruiting, and I was going to, in the beginning, I meant to congratulate everybody who's doing it, but, who got signed, fun to see the pictures of signing days and the excitement. But at the same time, that's a way the game has changed too. It's become a lot more about getting recruited to play in college than it has been about just competing for the joy of the game. And I think, there's some positives to the emphasis on recruiting and the opportunities that these kids are getting. But at the same time, there's also some negatives when the parents they're taking the college fund and they're putting it all into travel softball on the hopes of getting a scholarship. And then you lose sight of why did I start playing the game to begin with?
Yes. True statement. Yep. And again, I think the whole thing has changed, right? We had Cindy Bristow here. They didn't have VHS tapes and sending them out to people. And now it's all through X, Twitter, that stuff, your field level sports recruits, the videos that you're taking on your phones and stuff. It's a lot. That technology piece has changed the game tremendously. The recruiting, I still feel is kind of the same. You still have to get out there and see these kids and what they can do, right?
Right.
Video just doesn't. Video will give you some great information, but you want to go see them compete. I think that's the biggest thing. But yeah, it's like you said, it's definitely there's that, and I think that's the biggest gap between travel ball and college ball is now you have to come where travel ball is. You have a practice or two a week, show up on the weekends, you play 4 or 5 games. colleges, okay, you got a game on Monday and you got, 6 games this week and you got practice every day in between it, 6 a.m. weights. It's like, you better love the game up there because it's a real thing. That's when the work actually begins. People think you do all this work to get there, right? To get to college. And then you're like, oh, good. I'm done. Man, I made it. And then you get there and you're like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's when the real work begins, is when you're in college.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah.
And you're not done developing. It's when the work starts, like the real work, the 6 a.m. weights, the practices, the 6 to 8 games a week, sometimes depending on scheduling. So yeah, that's when the work starts. So you better love the game.
Right. And it's not always the Valhalla you think it is either. You find out that coach who loved you so much during the recruiting process turns out to not quite be the same person once you get out on the field.
Yes, and that's another topic that we're definitely going to have. So that's a great thing. So you're bringing up a lot of great future topics, Ken, and I think it's awesome. Hopefully our guests are enjoying those topics and we can dig into that a little bit, both of those that you talked about. So yeah, that's great, man. But yeah, I agree with you. Recruiting has definitely changed what's going on with the game.
Yep. So all I can say on that aspect of it is, don't lose sight of the fact that there is a reason that you started playing to begin with. It wasn't so that you could go to college A or college B. It was because it looked like it was fun. And as long as people keep the fun in the game, the rest of it, I think, can work out.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more.
All righty, Jay. Well, I guess that looks like that's a wrap. So thanks to everybody for listening and for the kind words you've been sharing with us. If you like what you're hearing, please remember to give us a like, leave a comment, and share this podcast on your social media channels. Make sure you never miss an episode by following us on your favorite podcast platform. If you're so inclined, you can also leave us a great review on Apple Podcasts to help more people find us. On behalf of the From the Coach's Mouth podcast, have a great rest of your week and weekend, and enjoy the holidays.